Orion at Kings Island is the newest Giga Coaster, having opened just last week. After riding Orion a few times, I can now say that I've ridden every single operating Giga Coaster in the world. So today, I want to review Orion, and over the course of this review, I'll compare it to the other Giga Coasters that I've ridden. To start, Orion got a lot of criticism from coaster enthusiasts after it was announced. Kings Island fans had been begging for a Giga Coaster for years, but after Kings Island fans finally got their wish in Orion, many complained. Some called it just a hyper, since the ninth tallest coaster in the world only stood 287 feet tall. The reason many, including myself, consider Orion a Giga Coaster is because it has a 300-foot drop. But ultimately, in the end, what matters is if Orion is a good ride. I can think of at least one other coaster over 300 feet tall that has proof that stats aren't everything. The other critique I often heard is that Orion was too short. Sure, it's not as long as Fury, but the coaster still checks in at over 5,300 feet in length, or roughly 100 feet shorter than Leviathan, another B&M Giga often criticized for its length. I'll go into more depth in a bit, but the ride didn't feel short. It felt like it had enough elements, and it felt like a more complete ride than Leviathan in my opinion. Orion cost $30 million and is reportedly Cedar Fair's most expensive addition ever. Would I have rather the ride continue? Well, sure, but I think that of most great rides. From the park's perspective, they have a highly marketable, high-capacity addition that's sure to be a crowd pleaser. Adding an extra 1,000 or so feet of track length is unlikely to have changed its marketability to a majority of guests. Orion is located in the very back of the park and it looks spectacular. The shade of blue the park selected really pops, and this is one of the most picturesque coasters I've ever seen. The hill and following elements tower over the back section of the park. Racer looks like a kiddie coaster compared to Orion. And I know not a lot of people will get to appreciate the lighting package this year, but it's just as fantastic as the ride. The lift hill has a bright blue strip similar to the one seen on Fury 325, and the supports are illuminated in changing multicolored lights. It reminds me of the light package found in Niagara Falls. But there's more to Orion than just its spiffy appearance, as it's in the brand new Area 72, or the completely rethemed X Sector. I was skeptical if the area's retheme would be anything more than a new name, but Kings Island did a fantastic job building an entire themed area around the new for 2020 edition. The entire area has a brand new soundtrack from IMAscore that sounds incredible. Has IMAscore ever made a bad soundtrack? The company is most well known in the theme park industry for the soundtracks it provides for the European theme parks, but Kings Island had previously used them for the soundtrack of Mystic Timbers. Orion's soundtrack perfectly captures the feel of a space and military theme. If I have one complaint about the musical score, it's that it's not audible through a majority of the queue line. You can hear it in the station in the area's plaza, but not in the switchbacks. As for the theming, there's some subtle theming all about the land, but the best theming can be found towards the end of Orion's queue line. Most of Orion's queue is an unshaded series of switchbacks, but the final queue building right before the station is incredible. It includes blueprints to rides, homages to past attractions, and if you look closely enough, in the top shelf in the last locker, even a SpongeBob reference to Wombology. Orion doesn't have a pre-show per se, but the queue building also plays a video that really feels like it could be part of a pre-show as it explains the ride's story. In all honesty, this may be Cedar Fair's best themed coaster ever. It's right up there with Copperhead Strike. And talking about solid theming is not something I ever expected to have to do with a Giga Coaster. If I have one complaint about the theming, it's that you don't get to spend nearly enough time in that queue building to appreciate all the details, and you don't get to see the video in full. When you reach the station, a greeter will assign you a row. This is similar to what Kings Island does on several of their other major coasters. And even on opening weekend with the immense crowds, they were more than happy to oblige seating requests for the front or back row. I'll go into more detail when I break down the ride element by element, but this is without a doubt a front row ride in my opinion. and that seems to be common opinion among coaster enthusiasts I met over the course of the day. Orion has the standard B&M Hypercoaster trains with the clamshell harness, and these are some of the most comfortable and best restraints on any coaster. I could sit in these seats all day and never get uncomfortable. Orion begins with a really speedy chain lift. If you've ridden Fury 325, the lift will feel equally as fast to that coaster. If you look to your right during the ascent, you get a fantastic view of Kings Island, but you don't have long to appreciate it. Once you crest the 287-foot lift, you fly down the 300-foot drop. If you've ridden any of the other B&M Gigas, this drop feels just as amazing. It seemingly lasts forever. The drop is the only reason I recommend trying the back row at least once, since the sustained floater airtime is matched by very few coasters, especially if you haven't ridden any of the other Giga coasters. Heck, the drop is so good you even get some floater airtime in the front row as well. But up front, the drop is really more about the sense of speed. You feel every bit of Orion's 91 mph top speed on the pullout, and I even started to gray out a bit there. That's followed by the massive 174-foot tall wave turn. Going into Orion, I had no clue how this element would ride. We're all familiar with the wave turns and RMCs that deliver copious amounts of sideways ejector airtime. And I'll pump the brakes right now. You don't get that type of airtime on Orion's wave turn. You do, however, get weak, but sustained floater airtime. And while it doesn't have the power of an RMC wave turn, it feels just as amazing since the B&M clamshell is much less restrictive. However, to get that airtime, you have to be in the front row. This element had no airtime nor laterals in the back row, which is one of the reasons why I prefer the front row. That's followed by this massive 200+ foot tall turnaround that many called a reverse treble clef. I was hopeful it would deliver the same crazy sideways airtime of Fury's treble clef, but it does not. Up front, it gives a teeny pop of airtime, and in the back, this is another element that doesn't really hit. In many ways, this just feels like a slightly better version of the standard B&M turnaround. You then dive back towards the ground and go over my favorite element on the ride outside of the first drop, in the speed hill. This hill is actually the smallest on the entire ride, so you haul over it. And it doesn't matter where you sit. You get some serious and sustained flagector airtime. The airtime in this element is more intense than the speed hills in either Mako or Shambhala. The airtime felt equal in strength to the final Bunny Hills and Fury 325, with the crazy speed of a Millennium Force. That's followed by a 147-foot tall Camelback, and this hill does include another point of contention within a trim brake. Yes, you will feel the trim brake bite, but the sustained floater airtime on this hill is still spectacular, so I don't think the trim hurts this element one bit. It's similar to the giant Camelback on Leviathan. Where I think the trim does impact the ride is on the falling Ampersand Helix. I've ridden Shambhala, which had the original Ampersand turnaround. While visually stunning, I thought the Ampersand turnaround on Shambhala did nothing. And unfortunately, that's how I felt about Orion's Helix. It didn't really have any force to it. Up front, you still have the rush of wind at least, but in the back, I just felt the element bleeding off the ride's speed. It sort of reminded me of the Helix on Fury 325, which is probably the worst element on an otherwise near-perfect coaster. Thankfully, Orion does finish strong with this banked airtime hill, and this hill reminded me of the airtime on Fury 325's treble clef. It was sustained sideways flagector airtime, and that airtime can be experienced throughout the entire train. Last but not least, you pop into the brake run. You don't get any airtime in the back, but if you're up front, you get arguably the strongest dose of flagector airtime on the entire ride. That is something I was not expecting. In terms of pacing, the coaster is excellent up front. Every element is fantastic except the turnaround and helix that are just okay, but the sense of speed helps mask the lack of forces there. In the back, Orion feels much more uneven since you alternate between amazing elements and elements that completely whiff. And since I visited Kings Island on the 4th of July, the park was open until 10 p.m., so I was able to get a rare night ride on Orion. And night rides in this coaster will be quite special. While the supports are well illuminated off-ride, you barely notice the lighting on-ride. which means the first half of this ride is pitch black and well isolated from the rest of the park. Compare that to Fury and a Leviathan, which border the entrance and parking lots, so you have quite a bit of light there. So I know there are two questions. How does this compare to the other Giga Coasters? And is this different enough from Diamondback? When comparing Orion to the other Gigas, it feels very similar to Leviathan. Like Leviathan, Orion has larger elements than the other North American Giga Coasters. As a result, the ride doesn't feel like an absolute speed demon from start to finish like Fury 325 or the Intamin Gigas. But you certainly feel that speed in the valleys in the first half. When looking at how Orion fits in with Kings Island, I think it fits in quite well. The ride feels a lot different than Diamondback. Diamondback is a series of camelbacks, one after another. Orion only has one camelback, and the rest of the ride has some off-axis hills and elements to try accentuating the coaster's speed. In my opinion, this is the best ride at Kings Island, and I think that will be the general consensus among parkgoers. So what do I rank Orion? Because of the better than expected theming and incredible front row ride, I'll give it a 9 out of 10. If you ride in the back, you should probably knock off a point and expect something that's closer to an 8 out of 10. I can't emphasize this enough with Orion, but ride it in the front row. Orion flows so nicely, and outside of the helix, I love pretty much every element up front. And being a brand new coaster, Orion is glass smooth and super re-rideable. I also should share that I may be a bit biased in favor of Orion because this was my 1000th coaster. That wasn't the original plan, but after my Texas trip fell apart due to rising infections, I realized I could make Orion a milestone coaster, and it was a worthy 1000th coaster in my opinion. Last but not least, I want to touch on the ride's capacity. When I rode it, Orion was only loading 2 guests per row, alternating between guests in the middle 2 seats on the odd-numbered rows, and guests on the outside seats in the even-numbered rows. And the dispatch times were dragged down by Kings Island's unloading procedures where only 1 row could disembark at a time. The employees were able to quickly check restraints once they were loaded, so once the COVID-19 precautions finish, this will be an absolute people eater like Fury or Leviathan with its 3 32-person trains. For those planning on riding Orion in the near future, it currently has a boarding pass system due to the ride's immense popularity and temporarily reduced capacity. I'll go into more detail in a separate video how the boarding pass process works, but in short, you're only limited to 1 ride per pass holder per day via the boarding pass system. However, the park does seem to reopen the standby queue to everyone at the end of the day if capacity allows for it. It's also worth noting that due to Orion's location in the back of the park, it is unable to operate during the park's nighttime fireworks show. This is similar to what has happened for years with the Beast. So in conclusion, Orion is a wonderful addition to Kings Island and my favorite ride there. The amount of criticism the ride received prior to opening isn't entirely fair, and I think its most ardent critics will be silenced after riding this monstrous new coaster in the front row. What are your thoughts on Orion? I'm interested to hear what you think if you have ridden the newest Giga Coaster or want to ride it. Thank you for listening and subscribe for more roller coaster reviews here at Canopy Coaster.